the Jazz Ranch, hip cats, finger popping daddies and groovy chicks. Welcome back. And you know, the KH, you know, he did some videos recently and he got these thumbs down. We did one and it got 5 thumbs down in the first day. And I say it was because of me. Because I was on the video and people don't dig me. They don't understand the alter ego. Well, you know, you all have alter egos. I'm the KH's alter ego. And you know what it means? It's an alternative self which is believed to be distinct from the person's normal or true original personality. But often, you know, that personality is something that you require. You know, in other words, you need that to balance yourself because, you know, some people are too serious, some people are too, you know, lackadaisical and so on. They need to get another side of their personality. So I help the KH to become loosen up and tell jokes, you know, and not take life so seriously. You shouldn't do that. But if you're taking life too seriously, your alter ego will help you with that. You know, if you're taking life too, you know, like lackadaisically, you don't care about anything, you might need to take it a little seriously. And that's where your alter ego will help you. Well, you know, I'll tell you about a time I was playing in New York, and we had this 4-piece band. We had a trumpet player, we had like, you know, bass, piano, drums. And, you know, I was really close with the bass player, but the drummer, Fred, boy, he had a problem with his time. He was like Logie. He had a day job and he was slowing up the tempos. He was like playing behind the beat. That's what we call it when you're playing right on the beat. You're playing behind the beat. He was playing so behind the beat where the tempos were slowing down. We couldn't stand it. Anyway, me and the bass player got together and said, we got to talk to the... So we talked to the leader. He said, well, you know, Fred, he's been with me a long time. I hate to say anything. I hate to hurt his feelings. He's very sensitive, you know. Well, okay, all right, we'll put up with it. You know, it didn't get better. You know, it just got worse. And so we finally said, we told the leader, it's either us or him. You either got to get rid of us or him. So he said, I hate to do that, but I need you guys more than I need him. I'll replace the drummer. I'll tell him. But he's going to take it pretty hard. I don't know what he'll do. They said, okay. So anyway, he told Fred finally, you know, he had to leave he had to fire him. But anyway, Fred got so upset by that. You know what he did? He went down in the subway and he jumped behind a subway train. Anyway, oh, hey, the KH, he doesn't like me telling stories and jokes. Okay, here he comes. He's got the guard dog. I got a split. I'll see you. I love that joke. Anyway, Giacomo Gates told me that joke anyway. He passed it on to the ultra dominant man. It's pretty funny. Anyway, you know, welcome to the Jazz Ranch, hip cats and groovy chicks. And you know, I started watching some videos, you know, on YouTube about borrowed notes. You know, you can Google it, you know. There's so many videos on this, and I watched a few of them. I said, well, what, you know. So I'm trying to put a video out now to explain my take on it. In other words, how I interpreted what these people were talking about, mostly in terms of theory and concepts. I want to apply them to a specific songs, and I want to play that song for you and show you what the borrowed notes are, what the distinction is between a borrowed note and a secondary dominant, and the distinction between those two and a tritone substitute, because they're all different, you know, but they all play a part in a song if you're playing jazz. So here we go now with a great song by Horace Silver called Strollin', and I'm going to talk about the concepts after that. Here we go. So now I've been watching a lot of videos that people have put out on YouTube about borrowed chords. And it's a concept that Barry Harris maybe came up with, and then everybody has taken a hold of it, but it might have gone back further. But it just means that you're using chords or notes outside of the scale that you're playing in, and you're creating harmonic movement within your melody that you're playing. And so I want to show it to you in a practical way in a song, but I'm also going to show you how that contrasts with two other concepts within this particular song, which are the tritone substitute and the secondary dominant. So we're going to be using the song Strollin, classic song by Horace Silver, jazz tune. You will see this more in jazz tunes than you will see in standards, but you will see a lot of these concepts in jazz tunes. This is not too complicated of a tune other than the fact that it's in the key of D flat, which is 5 flats, but you're going to see how those three concepts work within this song. Here we go. So now the first phrase is this. We're in the key of D flat, so the scale is, you have to know the scale to understand this. So this D flat scale is this. Same as the C scale, but a half step higher. So you have this. So yeah, that note's in the scale. Now this next note is chromatic to it. Then that note's in the scale. This note is in the scale. However, when you put it to chords, it changes. You know, you only saw one note that's out of the scale, right? But when we actually harmonize it, it's like this. That note's out of the scale. This is in the scale, but now that note is harmonized with a note that's not in the scale. And what it is, these are diminished chords. So you have D flat major now going to a diminished chord, right? And we could call it a D diminished if you like. Now here's a D flat 6, but then here, which would normally be a D flat major, now you have that interval. So now you have another diminished chord. You might have an E flat diminished chord, but it's all built on that one root of D flat. So you have this. It's a beautiful sound. Now this relates to that exercise by Barry Harris. If you know me, you know that I like to take concepts or theory examples and apply them to a song. So I've applied this Barry Harris concept of borrowed notes to the song Strollin by Horace Silver. And if you watch the video with Barry at the Academy, it's video number 4 or lesson or part 4, he takes the C6, which is C scale, and he makes it diminished. So now he's altering the scale with these notes that don't belong, or you could think of them as borrowed notes. And then what he does is he moves this note up a half step. So now that he has an F, he's created an F sharp minor 6 chord. You see how that works? In other words, he's borrowing that note from another scale, an F minor 6 scale. Then he goes down like this chromatically, which really is a B7. So this is really a B9, because there's B7, 8, 9. There's the 9, there's the 3rd, there's the 5th, there's the flat 7 or the minor 7. Then he takes it down to there, which is a flat 9 in the B chord, and then down to the B chord, and then resolves it to its resolution of B should resolve to E major. Then he does this beautiful line using a diminished chords built off of an E major, like this. So now I'm sure that Horace Silver took that concept that was prevalent, played by many pianists at that time, back in the 50s and 60s, and he wrote this melody based on that concept of chromaticism against the scale. Chromatic, there's a chromatic movement, there's the scale, there's the chromatic movement. Now I created a melody like this. Up to that note, Now, there's another borrowed note, you see. So that note, what is that note? Yeah, so this line here now, these chromatic tones would be forming diminished chords. That would be that diminished there. Call it what you like, F diminished, B diminished, D diminished. And this one would be an E flat diminished. So that would be the one that would fit the D flat 6th scale, diminished 6th scale on D flat would be that one. So that one fits it. We have this. There it is. There's the one. Goes back to D flat 6, you see. So it's in there, in that. Whether Horace knew it or not, he probably just heard it. He didn't really understand the theory of it according to how Barry thinks. But there's your first one. There's your first example of chromaticism and how it uses borrowed notes from the scale. Horace goes like this. He goes to that note. Now, this is very common in jazz. It's to do what I would call chromatic alterations of the scale. It goes up a half step, right? And also creates this kind of tension. A flat 9 against the 5 chord. But he's using a 2-5. Well, that's a borrowed note, which he goes down a half step. So there's this chromatic relationship between 2 5s, which is very common. That kind of 2-5, down a half step, 2-5, down a half step, 2-5, down a half step. In fact, the song Lover does that all the way through the melody. Goes, let's see. 2-5, down a half step, 2-5, down a half step. There's an example of it in a song that isn't even considered to be a jazz tune. It's a standard. So now, by definition, if we're in the key of D flat, its 5 chord is going to be the 5th step of the scale, and it's going to be a dominant 7. So it's going to be A flat 7. That wants to resolve back to, that's the dominant one, resolves back to tonic. That's the most important. The two most important chords in any song are its tonic and its dominant. You have to know what those are to start with. Now, any chord within this, statement, and we're going to talk about the 7th chords, of course. So we have D flat major, E flat minor, F minor 7, G flat major 7. There's your dominant, A flat 7, B flat minor 7, and then the last one, of course, is your C diminished, half diminished, D flat. So any chords that don't fit into that system are somehow altered, either as borrowed chords or secondary dominants, or the third one I call it was tritone substitute. So here in the song we have in the 4th, 5th measure, I'm not sure, let's see, we have this melody. There's your 3rd measure, 4th measure, now 5th. Okay, there's an alteration there, and there's a D flat 7, but these are borrowed notes. And then you have this. Now that's within the tonality, but you have this chord. You have a C7. Now the C7 here is moving to F minor, and C wants to move to F minor, so that becomes a secondary dominant. So the C7 is a secondary dominant, which is different from the A7 earlier on, which was a borrowed chord. And also the A flat minor and the D flat 7 there are borrowed chords. But it's still the same concept of chromaticism. In other words, E minor, A7, E flat minor, A flat 7 are chromatic. Now you have A flat minor 7, D flat 7, G minor 7, C7. So you have the same concept
And that's what holds this song together, not only its melody, but the chord structure. D flat, the 1 chord now up here, above the 2/5, now up to the 5 chord, and do the same progression, 2/5 chromatic, which is going to take me to the 3 chord, which is now F minor 7. So now, thinking about what Horace Silver was thinking about when he wrote this song, was he actually thinking, well, I'm going to play a note that's a borrowed note, and it will relate to some other scale? And, you know, I admire all the people on YouTube that are doing these videos and you know, theory concept videos, but what good are they unless you can apply them to a song? So I tried to do that with this song. Now that's an 11, right? I mean, because it's an E minor. He put the 2 in front of it. It's really an A7, you know, going to an A flat 7. So it's like a half step up from the dominant. But he puts a 2 in front of it, makes it 11 voicing. But what is that note? I mean, if you want to know what scale it relates back to, it's a dominant 7th, or probably relates back to D minor, which is a half step above the D flat. But do we really care? I mean, the fact is we want to know that how to voice it and what it means in the concept of the song, its chord changes. So it's a borrowed note, yeah. But what it is, it's like a 2/5 above the 5 chord of the song. So it's just a raised 5 down to the 5, back to the 1. You see, that's all you really need to know. You don't need to know, well, it relates to the Mixolydian, or relates to the Dorian, or what scale does it relate to. You can get so mixed up in that, you don't know what to think. I'm just saying, Horace probably just thought of it melodically. It was a nice sound, so he's going to put a 2/5 in front of it. Instead of going, he could have written it like this. That'd be pretty boring, right? In other words, in jazz, we go outside of the scale, and those are borrowed notes. Now, in other cases, they're just either secondary dominants or the tritone substitution. I'm going to show you in this song now where he's using those 2 examples. So a secondary dominant has to resolve to its related 1. Different from in the key of D flat, the dominant should be A flat. 7 wants to resolve back to the tonic, dominant tonic. But if we have a chord that doesn't fit into that scale, the example that I used was the A7 wants to resolve back to D, or D minor. But now it's being used in a 2/5 chromatically to take us back to the primary dominant. But now we also have this concept of tritone substitutes. Now, tritone substitute would be just the flat 5 of a dominant chord, usually a dominant chord. So the dominant chord in D flat major would be the A flat 7. Now what would be its flat 5 relationship? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, flat 5. So I'd put a D7 there at the end of the 16 bars. So I'd have this. There's a sharp 11, which is an altered or borrowed note. And then I go to this. Now, interesting, in the interesting way, that is a note in the scale of D flat, but the chord isn't. In other words, I've voiced the chord, it's a D7. If I used an A flat chord, it'd be just that, an A flat 13. But now if I use the tritone substitute, it means it's up a flat 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, flat. That's the root. The root becomes the minor 3rd. Well, I'm not going to use a minor 3rd. D flat, I'm going to use a dominant 7th with tension in it, because it's very similar to the A flat chord, except for the root. You see it has the same notes. A flat 7 has the same notes as the D7 sharp 9. And it's an interesting substitute chord. So in this video, I've tried to give you 3 examples or 3 concepts that are important, including borrowed chords or borrowed notes, secondary dominants, and tritone substitutes, and apply them in a practical way to a song, Strollin by Horace Silver. Now, you know, when you understand what the three concepts are and the difference between all of them, now you're understanding theory in a practical way, not just a way to do a lot of exercises. I want to give you a little look into my book. See, it's in a 3-ring binder. You can see this, which is very practical because you can take pages out and photocopy them, and it lies flat on the music stand. And there's no books like this that I've seen. And here's in book 2 the chapter on tritone substitution. So I give you examples, I give you theory, examples, practical examples in songs, then I give you a song to play. Here it relates to the cycle of fifths. Then I give you a song to play, in this case All the Things You Are, and I'm applying the concept of tritone substitutes to a specific song. So it's a very practical book that way. Please check it out on my website. Signing off from the Jazz Ranch, thanks so much for joining me this evening. Please write to me. I love to hear from you. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I love to hear your comments. I read all of them, and give me a week or two to answer all of them. Please go back to see your comment after a couple of weeks, and hopefully I will have caught up. But I answer all my comments and all my emails if you give me time. And if you don't get a response, write me again and just tell me I didn't get a response, and I will answer all your questions and comments. And I appreciate them. So until next time, I'll say in the words of my great friend Hermie Dressel, swing loose. And I'll see you next time around. Bye-bye.